Okay, so I've got my webpage pulled up again, and I want to take a look at how we include fonts on our page. And we've kind of looked at this before. So, like for example, in here, um, I have picked generic font families for certain types of fonts. So, like, there are. So here in my paragraph, I have picked a sans serif font, and you can see that there's other kinds we can pick. Um, so we have cursive and monospace fonts and serif fonts, um, but we still haven't specified the exact typeface we want. So I'm going to show a couple different approaches to this, and I'm going to start out with one that is a very wrong idea, and explain why, and then I'll show you two approaches that are better. So the first thing we might want to do is let's just fire up something like Word and make a new doc. And we want to look at all these fonts. And so I've got all these fonts right here. Um, and let's suppose that I want to use, we'll do the Cooper Black. Okay. And so there's the name of the font, and I'll copy that. And I'll go to my heading one. And I'll specify that that's the font I want to use. By the way, if you ever use a font name that has more than one word in it, so there's spaces, then you have to surround it in quotes. But if it's just a one-word font, like Arial or something like that, you don't have to. And I'll refresh my page, and it looks like it worked just fine. But there's a problem here, and that is, where is this font stored? And I can actually look at my computer, and if I go to the Windows directory, and there should be a fonts folder in here. And this is a list of all of the fonts, right? These are actually the files that contain all of the typefaces on my computer. And it worked fine on my webpage because the font Cooper Black is installed on my computer. But this is the World Wide Web. And what we have to consider is that there's a very good chance that somebody else somewhere else in the world does not have the same fonts installed in their computer. And so we'll go back to my font list here. Like, I'm on a Windows computer right now, and a good chunk of these fonts came installed with Windows. There's probably another batch of fonts in here that came with Microsoft Word. And even what fonts you get with Microsoft Word depends on the version. If you get a student version or like a pro version, you might get fewer or more fonts based on that. You might get different fonts based on the year of Microsoft Word you have. So we really can't rely on other people browsing our website to have the same set of fonts as we do. And so therefore, this is a bad idea. Let me close out Word. Okay, so instead, right, the next option that's a little bit better is I'm going to Google web safe fonts, and I'll just click the first link. And there's probably lots of sites like this out there, but what you're going to find is there are going to be some sites that have lists of fonts that are likely installed on almost everybody's computer. So let's suppose I like this font here, which is Impact. And I'm going to copy that. And then we'll talk about what's happening. So I'll refresh the page. And okay, now I got the Impact font, I believe. And so two things are happening here. One is we have specified an order of preference. So Impact, right? So what's going to happen is when the heading one is rendered, if Impact is installed on the computer of the person viewing the website, then it's going to use Impact. And if it doesn't have Impact, then it'll look for the charcoal font and render in that instead. And then finally, the final fallback is just use the default sans serif font. And so here we kind of have it set up where if you're a Windows user, you probably have this one. If you're a Mac user, you probably have this one, at least if you don't have Impact. And so that should cover, right, most people. So that's another way to do it. And each of these, when I Googled web-safe fonts here, what I found is like Arial and Helvetica are pretty similar looking. This is more Windows, this is more Mac. And then, so each of these kind of font groupings here is a list of fonts where they look pretty similar, and then, between these two fonts, at least one of the two is probably, or is highly likely that it's going to be on almost everyone's computer. All right, so that's a reasonable approach. And so I might take that approach for maybe my paragraphs. I like sans serif fonts, but I want to be a little more specific. I want to make sure we're using Arial if we have it, then Helvetica if we don't, and then sans serif. Okay, font. But maybe for my heading one, and I want to pick a different, pick a more interesting looking font. And one of the things you can see as I scroll through these web-safe fonts is they're all kind of boring. So the next option we have is to use a web font. And so I'm going to Google fonts. Turns out Google is one of many sites that has a bunch of fonts that are free for us to use. And this is going to be super easy. So first off, I can do things like pick, if I want handwriting fonts, I can narrow it down and see handwriting fonts. If I want serif fonts or sans serif fonts, I can do that. So I'm just going to leave them all on, and I'll scroll here until I find something that I like. And so let's say I want to use we'll just pick something that's obvious. Okay, we'll pick Grand Standard. I don't know if it's particularly great looking for my page, but at least you'll be able to, it's unique enough you'll be able to see that it changes. And what we do is you click the font, and then let's make this a little bit bigger. You have a bunch of options here. And what we're going to do is think about where we're going to use it. So regular text is, right, so if you're going to use it for regular text, and then I'm going to select that style. And since I might want to use it in my headings are bold, so I'm going to pick bold, which is the 700 weight font. I'll select that as well. And I'll copy and paste this. So we go over to the side, and there's a link, and they give you some HTML code. And it's got the angle brackets and the word link, so that's HTML. And we go over here, and hey, I've got angle brackets and a link. So I guess I should paste it along with that line. And what this is going to do, what this line will do, is it's going to go to the Google website, and it's going to download that font family in the normal 400 weight and the bold 700 weight for us. And so now what that means is, let me copy this line over here, the CSS rule, I go into my CSS and I paste that in. And since the Grand Standard font has been loaded on all my pages, I now get to use it just like I can any other font family. And so there we go. And this is safe because anybody anywhere in the world, when they view my site, right, what they're doing is getting the font from Google before they render, right, the text on the page. And so we no longer have to worry about what's installed on any user's particular machine. All right. So, so the three approaches I would take would be, one approach would be just specify a generic font family like serif or sans serif. A second approach would be to restrict yourself to a list of web-safe fonts and put them in order of preference, right? And you just Google a list of web-safe fonts for that. And the third option, and I think the nicest option, because it gives you the most control, is to use some kind of font service where you can have your website download fonts from another site, and then they're available everywhere. So, I use Google Fonts really just because it's super easy to use, and because since we're using these on our school computers, and it's a Google site, I know it's not going to end up blocked or anything like that. All right. One last comment just about loading fonts. Um, so I just happened to pick this Grand Standard font, and you see you have a lot of different font weights here, and we have italic and then bold italic and stuff. One thing we would like to do is make sure that web pages load as quickly as possible. So if you're not going to use all of these different font weights, then you probably shouldn't select those styles. So I selected normal or regular and the bold because I knew I was going to use it for a heading, and I was thinking, well, maybe I want to use it somewhere on the page that's not bold. I don't anticipate myself needing italics anywhere, so I'm not I'm not selecting the italic size. But if I did think I might want to use italics, I would just add that to the list as well. And now I could use like italicized text in my headings if I wanted to as well. But I'll remove that. And the reason the only reason I'm just selecting particular versions of this is so that it'll speed up the download a little bit, because sometimes font files can get a little bit large. All right. And so I think that's it. And so hopefully you should now have some fun getting more interesting fonts on your site.